Well, after what has been one of the most pathetic and embarrassing chapters of a rapper's career that we have ever seen, Drake has finally released the collab album that he has been hyping up with PartyNextDoor, and now while this record just came out, what is already so clear is that as this is Drake's first album release since losing everything to Kendrick Lamar in their beef, and of course following so many other problems that he has created. In terms of what Drake should be trying to prove, the stakes have never been higher, but in this time where if this album fails, Drake is more than done forever, let me put this into perspective from the fact that Kendrick Lamar told him to stop rapping as he likes Drake with the melodies, and he did just that here, to also the fact that Kendrick made fun of him for abandoning his own city's music scene in pursuit of the biggest trends on Not Like Us. And now he has ran back home and is making this album all about where he is from, and of course it's an actual collab project with an artist from there in PartyNextDoor. Just from the optics of what this album is representing, it is just showing that in this time where Kendrick Lamar has never made Drake look worse, that Drake is just folding even further, as his moves here are managing to make Kendrick's diss tracks just become even more true, and this is especially seen by the fact that on day one of this album coming out, it has already gotten Drake in so much controversy, not just for the music, but also because Drake straight up stole and copied from other rappers' entire creative visions and albums to make and define this record in the first place, and seemingly because of this and so much more, aside from Drake's little corner of delusional fans who still want to stay in the same sad place that he is, everyone else hates this thing. But now before we go any further into this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And so now when it comes to Drake's first album since this beef, which we are going to call SS for You from here, because even compared to all of the other drawn out, long, and cringy titles Drake has used in the past, this ranks among the very worst. So far, this album is just creating more problems than you could possibly imagine, and for all of the most embarrassing reasons, because despite Drake in reality having so many different things and experiences he has been through in this all-time low in his career, and any half-decent artist can turn this into multiple albums and experiences worth of material and songs. The subject matter and content that Drake talks about here manages to rival an album as laughable as For All the Dogs, as his most immature. Because when the stakes have never been higher and when Drake has never been in a more pivotal position for the future of his legacy as a rapper and artist and for his career in terms of the industry, he has decided to switch up that mentality from taunting Kendrick Lamar and telling him to drop music over and over again, and now he's trying to tie everything together, including his biggest failures, into these immature narratives that he is trying to push throughout song after song on this album with lyrics like this. And now when it comes to the concept of a creative drought, I think what is very clear is that there is few albums out right now that can even rival this record in that category. Because really, with this album and its 21 tracks, which so many people are saying is making for one of the most tedious listens they have heard in a while, because beyond the quality, which is a conversation for later, there is hardly any variety within the beat choices, flows and voices, and of course the subject matter, because Drake does not want to face reality. And now just putting into perspective how lazy this entire album seems to be, and ultimately how this album, just from existing, is making a song like Not Like Us and everything Kendrick Lamar said seem more true, comes down to the fact of what Drake did to release this album, which is truly disrespectful to hip-hop and really the entire music in our world. As really, before we go any further into the actual music on this thing, which really may be a favor considering the conversation around this album, right now so many hip-hop heads and people have realized that Drake is never coming back, and even despite the fact that now we have a new album from him, because he doesn't even respect the culture, his peers, or the craft of hip-hop enough to come up with original ideas, he is really in bigger trouble than we could have ever imagined. As from the branding and title of this album, which is riding with the initials of SSS, and that has all been over everything for Drake and Party, to the artwork they have been releasing, like the back cover, which is featuring bunnies, and even on the front cover of this album, which a smaller rapper is saying that OVO took from him without ever crediting him. Overall, with this new album from Drake and Party, it has been discovered that they stole the entire creative direction for this record from other artists, and specifically, with the Rabbits and the whole SSS moniker, they stole this from none other than one of the most respected MCs working today in Freddie Gibbs, as with his 2022 album Sold Soul separately. From the Rabbits, which are not just his signature trademark but the album's mascot, to the SSS branding and title, which he made the entire slogan and concept of this record around. All in all, using these two same elements at the front of your record does not just happen by accident, and while Drake fans were trying to defend him and say that this indeed was the case, because in their eyes, and again, these people are not hip-hop fans, they are Drake fans. They are so superficial that they think Freddie is irrelevant and insignificant, and that because Drake is so big, you would have never even heard of the guy. The best part about this all is that after all of the questions around what actually happened here, we got a confirmed story about a time that didn't just confirm that Drake knows who Freddie Gibbs is, as we saw a literal picture of the two together, but we also found out that Drake was supposed to work on music with him, and not just on any record, but for this very album, which had the exact same branding as Drake and Party's record that just dropped. And seemingly Drake was well informed on what the concept and presentation of this thing was gonna be. And so now, solidifying the fact that Drake has now pretty much straight up copied what Freddie did here, but really making this story even crazier, is that Drake also was supposed to and agreed to be on a song for Freddie's project back then, and while Freddie sent him a record that was produced by Pharrell, and keep in mind this was before we knew that Drake was extending his beef with Pusha T to him, as nobody has ever said anything bad about Pharrell because he's one of the nicest guys in the music industry. And then of course Drake never did the song. When we look at this in its entirety with all of this, from the fact that Freddie has been mad that Drake stood him up, to now the fact that he knows that Drake made a conscious decision to make something so similar to his work. I mean, before we even get to the actual music here, it's no surprise why Drake did nothing to win anyone back with this record, and why it's already getting so much backlash, because it's overall trying to stand up and create an aesthetic with another artist's vision. And I mean, if you wanted to try and give Drake the benefit of the doubt here even, as Drake is known for reaching into pockets of hip-hop and stealing other artists' sauce and then fronting it as their own to his fans, and especially he loves doing this with artists who are smaller than him, because with For All the Dogs and then Scary Hours 3, this is exactly what he did with all the Conductor Williams and Alchemist drumless production, as again, he just stole this entire wave of what rappers like Westside, Benny, and Conway popularized, and he really never gave them their proper credit. As really, from the producers he worked with in this era to the jacket he wore in the 8 AM in Charlotte video, that was all from them. Overall, with Drake now having so many similarities to another rapper who, while respected in the industry, does not have his popularity and fan base size, I mean, this doesn't just happen by coincidence, and whether Drake thought he could get away with this or he just didn't care at all. Ripping work out of your peers' hands and trying to claim it as your own is what Not Like Us verse 3 is about as a whole, and why that record worked so well in the first place. And now with all of this, is we are now in a new chapter of Drake's career because he has finally released a new album and he is trying to make some sort of a statement to win people back. While I'm not going to talk about my personal opinion on this record yet because we will be here for way too long, so be sure to leave a like and subscribe to stick around for that. Overall, what is important and what we can tell that is so significant to the entire story of Drake's career and hip-hop is that when it comes to the people who are not your fans, who are making these desperate efforts to support you and try to make this thing not fail, and especially in this time where character matters more than anything, and again, Drake has never been in a worse place because Kendrick Lamar just won 5 Grammys for Not Like Us, and he played it during the most watched Super Bowl halftime show of all time, which speaks for itself in terms of the impact it is having, as Kendrick Lamar and as a result his message have never been seeing a greater impact. All in all, between everything against him, and now the product Drake put out, which is a record built off work from other creatives who actually have talent. Just from hearing this thing once, you can tell that there is no growth or maturity being shown here, and even when it comes to Drake's ability as a hitmaker. So far, there is not a single song creating waves and making a moment with people like all of his other albums have in the past, even if that comes from a meme where the music is otherwise lacking, like we saw on For All the Dogs with the collaboration between him and Yeat. And because of this, overall, as Drake puts this record out into one of the most competitive landscapes in the industry that we have ever seen, as from stars from Kendrick Lamar, SZA, Bad Bunny, and The Weeknd, to so many others, there are a ton of people seeing super strong performances with their new records, and in Kendrick's case, his entire catalog is doing numbers that Drake could never, as really we have never seen a more successful rapper than Kendrick in this time. Overall, this little R&B album Drake has with PartyNextDoor that people are dragging for all of these reasons on day one does not seem like it's going to be able to compete and have any sort of longevity in the industry. And when you see how Drake has presented himself here, and again, in this time where all of the music is evolving and from the sounds we want to hear to the stories we want, artists are pushing the bar forward for what defines greatness, because again, from Kendrick Lamar to The Weeknd Weeknd specifically, in their own ways, they have shown what the standard needs to be for an artist and the work they put out in the moment. This album, which has Drake putting people to sleep because it is not moving things forward, just seems like another bad move on his end. And especially now because this record has shown the entire hip-hop world and Drake's peers that he will just blatantly copy your work without any regard, which again is something Freddie Gibbs has now called him out for, as there is no getting around what he has done. Overall, everything is looking terrible for Drake in this album, and as we see this record come into the music world and try to win back everything he lost and all of the ground that has been taken, as Kendrick Lamar has had the greatest run we have ever seen from a rapper, when you put everything together, it seems clear that from here on out, while we don't know how all of this is gonna end yet, if we compare the acclaim and excitement that GNX got when it dropped to the laughter and indifference we are seeing here that is really turning into disdain already, well then SS4U may end up being an even bigger mess than we originally thought. And so now with all this said, let me know. What do you think of this new Drake and P&D album? What are your thoughts, and how do you think this record is going to perform? Now, I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and if you made it to this point in the video and want to see my official review for this record, which will be coming very soon as I just process this whole thing more, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And now, if you want to see just how before this album came out, Drake made a horrible mistake with his label, which is going to make sure that this record more than fails, check out the suggested video.